Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to my heart-to-heart soulful conversation. I'm Charlotte McGinnis, and as always, really happy to be here to share these awesome people with you every week. And, everybody says, how do you get all these great people? And I don't know. I've got some good juju out there, good people coming in, and everyone said yes. And today is no exception by any means. Dale Allen Hoffman's been a good friend of mine for many years and was a regular at the Namaste Center. And we always had a packed house when Dale came, and his messages were always so deep and profound and definitely got us thinking from another way, another perspective. And Dale is certainly an expert on all things Aramaic, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I first want to just say, Dale, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, I'm thrilled. Anytime you ask, I'm there. I always tell you that. So I just need Ellen can't hear this, can she? As long as
She
as
can't.
long as I know that you're going to be smiling, I'm there. So
Ellen's around here somewhere. She's unpacking a delivery that we got.
oh,
Actually,
cool,
I can hear in the rip of the boxes. Toilet paper, if you want to know. So,
nice.
gotta have it, right? So anyway, it's really nice to have you back. I know you were on a couple of years ago, and we've done a lot of things since then. We did our Ascension 22 program, which was great the with Bob and Shannon and uh, the
The
beautiful
powers,
the powers. Yeah,
the powers of love.
yes, the powers
Yeah.
of love.
So
Yes, indeed. I was looking for that powers. Yes, and they're two beautiful beings for sure. But anyway, here we are, and there's so many things I want to talk about, Dale. Because there's a lot of stuff happening on the planet. But I'm curious, before we go there, actually, I know you have a background in A Course in Miracles, as I do. And, sort of give me a little bit of a brief history of the Course of Miracles, and then how you were moved into how'd you get interested in the Aramaic teachings?
it's funny you asked that because today's what, Wednesday. Last Monday, Loretta and I were in Charlotte. Our No, last Tuesday. So yeah, a week ago yesterday, our dear friend Steve Vai, an amazing musician. He wrote the foreword to my book, Echoes of an Ancient Dream, and we're sitting with him at the Belk Theater, in the middle of Charlotte, just kind of talking. And we always usually end up on A Course in Miracles at some point. And I said to Steve, and I've said it before, I'm like, when the Aramaic showed up for me, I don't think well, really, when it showed up fully, because it really showed up when I was in my teens, and it just looked stodgy and dusty. And then when I saw it come alive, I don't think I would have recognized it without A Course in Miracles. Because when I was, 17, I started doing the monthly study group at the New York Open Center with Mary Ann Williamson. And then when Return to Love came out, all of a sudden it went from like a dozen people to like hundreds of people wanting to get in. And then she started doing town hall. She was doing the first, was it Tuesday and Wednesday, or Wednesday and Thursday of each month? She'd fly back from LA because she wasn't in New York anymore. And she'd have thousands at town hall. And I really know that there was I've said this to Jerry Jampowski before too. I was like, there was like a seasoning process, and it wasn't like sprinkling something on me in a sense. It was like the course helped draw out the essence of my sight in a lot of ways, so that when the Aramaic plopped in my lap, I went, oh, I get that. I totally, actually, Michael Rice said you had to peel me off the ceiling, because like I saw him the first time, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, what are you doing up there? And I'm like looking down, because it was like, whoa, this is exactly what I saw in A Course, and it's what I felt in the Jesus teachings, as an example, when I was 7 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, the couple of things, gosh, so many things I want to ask you just from that. Number one, we probably were in that town hall at the same time, because I was
Possibly.
teaching golf in Westchester, New York, and I used to take the train down to see Mary Ann. None of my friends were interested, so I'd go by myself.
Me too. I went alone.
Yeah.
So
And I'll never forget the first time I saw her, I was shocked at how tiny she was because I had this envision, her presence was so huge.
yeah.
But that was an awesome time for me as well. And Michael Rice certainly was a big part of my course experience as well. And I know you two worked closely together for quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, I edited a couple of old VHS tapes. I don't know if you know what those are. Just kidding.
I think I remember.
After vinyl, before CD. He, I did like production, sort of like taking some of his really old stuff, and because I know a lot about that, it was kind of my business while I was doing all the Aramaic stuff on the side. And he did one was called "What Is the World." I can't remember the other. A couple of Course in Miracles VHSs that he put out like in the early '80s that were so like wow. It's funny, like I got so much like being around Marianne for so long, but the thing that I think hits me like really in my heart in a sense is it was when I moved to Florida. I moved away from New York City and Jersey, being outside of Philadelphia, and moved to Florida in Indian Rocks Beach. I hooked in with a Course in Miracles group there, and there was this guy Mitch Cohen, who's the one that first mentioned Michael Rice to me.
Ooh.
But Mitch was I loved it because he would say things like, I don't really know what this lesson means, but I can really feel it in my heart. And it really spoke to me on a whole different level because I think a lot of people go to the course and they'll immediately see, oh, it's too cognitive. I'm like, no, you don't understand. That cognitive stuff isn't for you to understand. It's not for you to memorize. That's for kind of twisting your intellect into a pretzel so that presence, so that Christ can shine through. And when people
Mm.
started getting that, it was amazing. Like people would come to see Marianne, and I remember like women that were in their late 80s. There was a lot of HIV positive people that I befriended, and month after month, it was kind of a checklist of who did we lose in the last 4 weeks. Um, but I remember like women in their like late 80s and 90s, and they'd be like, I don't have a clue what this means, but wow, I can feel it. And I
Yeah.
think that spoke to me so much. There's a video on YouTube of me from, I don't know, 15 years ago on Atlanta public television in Atlanta, called My Life in A Course in Miracles. And people are constantly sending it to me saying, I didn't know you were into A Course in Miracles. I'm like, that's 15 years old. But
That's amazing. Well, let me ask you this. I don't know if I've ever known this about you or not, but were you born Jewish? I know your name's
no,
Hoffman.
funny. It's so great that you make, yeah, there's certain things that I've found out recently. I'm not really putting it out there yet, but basically, my bloodline on one side isn't my bloodline. Funny, I go to the doctor and I'm like, they're like, oh, well, you're this parent had this condition, and I'm like, actually, no, because I found out they're not my parent. So
Mm.
anyway, when I did get back my DNA recently, I really expected, not necessarily that I was even conscious of being Jewish, but that it was in there. But it was like 40% German, which I already knew that. And then the next one was English and Dutch and Scottish.
Hmm.
And it was like a lot of Scottish, which is intriguing because a lot of the Aramaic research, I would see these allusions to like Magdalene having been being more like island Scotch rather than from Egypt or Israel. And, there's writings that say her hair was black, like onyx, but in the light would shine red. And they're like, ooh,
Interesting.
that's interesting.
Mm.
So no, I'm not. And I had no basis. I mean, I had Jewish friends. I also had Catholic friends. And honestly, growing up Methodist and
Hey,
Episcopalian, I
okay. I
kind of
knew
went
I
to two
like
different
that.
kinds of churches. It's like when I would go to with my friend Billy McNamara, and I'd go to his Catholic church, and it was so foreign to me. But I would go to the Methodist church, which was how I was raised, which I'm thankful for, because even though it gets a little flat sometimes, or if not most of the time, I didn't have fireballs of guilt thrown in my face. And then we
Yeah, I
started
agree.
going to the Episcopal Church, catty corner to that in New Jersey, in Clarksboro, New Jersey. And then I got to see sort of the pageantry of Catholicism, but it was like same great taste, but less filling. Like it didn't have the heaviness to it, but it had the beauty. So
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of I'm thankful for that because if I was raised I'm just and I don't mean to sound like I'm pointing fingers, but if I was raised Catholic or white Southern Baptist, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing because I would have too much fear of
Too
burning in
much.
hell. That
Yeah.
doesn't even exist. And I'm a huge Dante fan. I'm a huge Dante Alighieri fan. I'm actually going to be releasing programs and videos of me actually speaking uh the Divine Comedy, like reading parts of it in old Florentine Italian and things. But most people don't even realize like the modern idea of hell comes from Dante, who was a poet who was excommunicated by the Catholic Church.
Dante's Inferno.
Yeah, people don't even know that stuff. They have no
Wow.
idea that it's not in the Bible. So
Wow. Well, that's interesting because number one, I too grew up Methodist, and I had a very beautiful, benign family. None of the guilt.
I understand benign. I
Yeah,
get that. You're not
it
talking
was
about a
just
tumor. You're just
yeah,
saying,
it was just
things
like
were fine, hunky
it was
dory,
pleasant. I never had that guilt or any of that, so I was really grateful for that. And the church I grew up in West Virginia is one of the two that split and is very welcoming and open, and it's a beautiful church. But that being said, the reason I even brought that question up about you being Jewish or not is the course did, and this is going to lead a lead-in question. The course definitely attracted a lot of the main teachers in the course in the beginning, especially were Jewish, being Marianne, you mentioned Jampolsky, many
Mhm.
others. And they were able to relate to Jesus through the teachings of the course. So you've had your Methodist Christian Jesus, you've had your Course in Miracles Jesus, and your Aramaic Jesus. Uh, where do they meet?
Well, I don't think they do because all of what those are really in the most sense, and this is something that's different about the way I teach versus any other people I know, is that's all in belief systems, in Michael Rice calls it BS. But I got to pause and just go back for a second and say, if your church didn't become a welcoming church in West Virginia, the only other choice they have other than welcoming is becoming anti-Christian, is to go against the teachings of Jesus. If you're not welcoming all hearts, don't call yourself a Christian. And I don't call myself a Christian anyway because Jesus was not a Christian. And people will say, yeah, because he was Jewish. And I'm like, well, he wasn't exactly a card carrying Jew. He was railing against that too. And he was railing against the way people dress in particular ways or walk around the wash basin the right way or how they sort of polish the outside of the cup, yet the insides remain contaminated. Anyway, what I mean by that is just the interesting thing about the Aramaic for me is when I first saw it, all I saw was theology. All the teachers that I went and looked at when I was in my teens, bless their hearts, I stand on some of their shoulders. It was just so theological. I was like, well, you're not really. It's like, okay, so Malkuta, the word translated as kingdom, reign or counsel or advise. Okay, that's theology. What does reign, REIGN, mean? What does counsel mean? What does advise mean? And it was actually with Dr. Rice's stuff that I went, oh, look at this. Somebody's actually living it instead of just teaching it.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that really got me, though, was I realized that, like, the ideas of, like, however many versions of the Christian Jesus or a Catholic Jesus or an electric Jesus or all these different Jesuses, the Aramaic one's interesting because it's not really up there on the screen like all those different ones. It's kind of back in the projector. And it's like a lot of people and this is something, I love it that you've got my man behind you, Yogananda, looking at me
There
all
you go.
from afar because, he said about transferring our sense of identity from the pseudo soul or the ego in Latin and Koine Greek, it was ego, like the waffle. It just means individualized self. It doesn't mean all this stuff that modern psychology puts on it. And that's why I love a course, is because a course, I'll come back to that in a second. But Yogananda said to transfer our sense of identity from the pseudo soul or ego back to the true inherent nature of our divinity, and to become the ever joyous witness of a stupendous cosmic drama. And I said that at Namaste every time I was there. But I want to add in something from Sri Aurobindo, where he called the ego a supra-rational enigma. And for me, that was the richness of A Course in Miracles, is it was basically explaining to us that we're talking about something that's not really there. And it's this kind of protection mechanism. It's a persona, it's a mask, whatever. And I know when I started getting really deep in the experiential aspects of the Aramaic and looking at all the people that were deep in the theology of it, I realized that all the theology and all of these beliefs existed on the ego level. But when I came back to the point of projection, so to speak, the level of the heart, without meaning to sound too new agey, that level of feeling, I realized that the kind of convergence, this is an interesting thought, didn't even, number one, it didn't really exist. And number two, it had no meaning other than what we put on with our beliefs. And what I'm saying is people don't even believe what they think they believe. They think that their beliefs come from their thoughts, and that has a lot to do with a lot of modern psychological misperceptions. Belief doesn't come from what you think or what you put out. It comes from your feeling. It comes from what you feel behind the beliefs, such as Yeshua entering into the temple and people say, yeah, he flipped the tables. I'm like, wait, he didn't just flip the tables. He also flipped the seats or the chairs. Table in Aramaic is a representation of what do you project into the world? What are your beliefs? What are your morals? What are your values and all those things? But behind that of what you think, which exists in the ego, which is a super-rational enigma, behind that is what you feel, and that's the seat. That's what you really feel behind what you're thinking. And unfortunately, there's been such a focus on belief and thought that we've kind of turned thought into God, yet the truth of the matter is every thought we've ever had is nothing but a delusion of a separate mind that doesn't exist in the first place. And I was able to get that from A Course. And it's funny, I would see people and they would try memorizing it and all these different things. And I was like, I heard you kind of railing against the evangelists. You're kind of doing the same thing, memorizing these words. You're trying to understand them. It's like, I get that. But if you could go and read through and breathe mindfully through the process, you can get to the other end and have no idea what the page said, but you'll experience the lesson on a level that's truly integrated and far deeper than you'll ever get by getting it here.
I agree with that.
I know I went back to the course there, but
I feel I'd love to see how they are compatible and where they might be misunderstood or misled. But you did bring up an interesting point. The money changers, flipping the tables. So often people, when I'll be teaching or sharing the course, we talk about Jesus, being the embodiment of pure love, unconditional love and non-judgment and so on and so forth. And even the course that says anger is never justified. So people always go back, well, what about that? The money changers. So I actually, in Yogananda's book, there's a book.
Second Coming of Christ.
Yes, the Second Coming of Christ. He did
right here at left level.
It's right behind me.
The 2 volumes I've got in red.
That's fabulous. And that book is actually, as you know, Yogananda's inner conversation with Christ, really. And it did clarify that. From what I gather, he said in that actual incident, Jesus was there and met them in a language they could understand, but it was coming from love. And sometimes in this world, it's not all about like pink.
This is such an awesome question. I'm like chomping at the bit right now.
Pink paint and fluff, but sometimes the most loving thing to do is to say, no. So what are your thoughts on that?
First of all, it doesn't say anywhere that he was pissed off or angry or hostile.
Mm-hmm.
However, grabbing something off camera here, there's an idea, and I'll be talking about this like in my Zoom event next weekend, but There's an idea in Aramaic, it's called the pinnacle of the temple. Okay. Where's the temple? Is it a brick tower that Jesus climbs up? No, it's an ancient Aramaic metaphor. This is the temple. In Aramaic, the word's haikla. Yeshua said, I come to give you chaya and give it abundantly. Chaya, hayim. In Aramaic, chayim is life, but it doesn't just mean life. It literally means conscious life energy. So he's not just saying, I come to make you live longer. He's coming to say, I come to wake you up. Okay, but that's the root of haikla. The kla sound in Aramaic means something that's gathered, a gathering of conscious life energy. So we're talking about the energy body. Okay, this is the church, this is the temple. And actually in Egyptian, it's called the ka, the mer, the ka, and the ba. So ba would be, of course, body. But the pinnacle of the temple is a moment when the energy body gets to a place, almost like a balloon when you blow into it. And it's just about to burst. It's just about to burst. And it's funny, when a balloon gets like that, you start seeing the places where it's more rigid. You see the places where it's a little more thin, where the burst could happen, where the letting go can happen. But we have these, literally the evolutionary moment of truth, these catalytic moments that if I have 5 different people and I'm in a really strong or intense clarity about something, people can easily translate that as me being angry or hostile or pissed off or whatever the thing may be. And then, but going back, even with that, number one, it doesn't say that he was, but number two, I liken it to this. There's a great scene in the first, I got to memorize the words. I had the words in my head and then I lost them because I'm about to turn 52 and I didn't think them enough, so they fell out of the side of my ear. But there's this scene in Fellowship of the Ring where Ian McKellen, Gandalf, is being tempted by Bilbo Baggins to wear the ring, to put it on. And Gandalf kind of goes, woo, and like he gets to the pinnacle of the temple energetically, and I don't remember the words, but he basically says, do not put such temptation in front of me, because he knows he can't fully resist whatever. My point is, that kind of like absolute, it would look almost ferocious to some people, when the truth of the matter is, if you look at the facts of what was really going on in the temple, and if you just look in the Bible, they were slaughtering mass amounts of animals. And we know that they were often knee deep. These priests would be knee deep in blood from hundreds of thousands of sacrifices in the temple a day. And if you trace that word back, that was translated as, I don't remember what it was that it's in most Bibles. Basically, not the money changers, but he calls them thieves or something. It's closer in the Hebrew to murderers. And I mean, let's look at it this way. I'll add it another way here too. I was just talking to you about how I was at Ingles here in West Asheville, and there was a guy with his pants down, like dancing in front of traffic. And I'm like, thank God I was on the backside. Not that I wanted to see that either, but the point I'm making is, if someone, had some kind of mental issue or something, or even not even went toward one of my children, me as the protector, as the father, I'm pretty much going to do whatever I have to do to protect my child. Now, to me, kind of like the apple of your eye, this is something that's quite personal to Yeshua. This is something that he knows the true value of. And it's an interesting side note in this. I'll say to people, what's the, first commandment? And, what's that one commandment? It's actually the second, isn't it? People say, thou shalt not kill. And I'm like, it doesn't say thou shalt not kill. It's like, it says, thou shalt not murder. Now, am I saying go out and kill, just don't murder? I'm not saying that. My point is that all of this is about the intention behind it and what's your goal. I'm quite sure that for him, his goal was not harm. His goal was not hostility. It was about protecting or I don't want to say defending, but sharing the full essence of love, of the sanctity of that temple space.
Right.
And somebody's going to see that, and some people are going to think, oh, well, he's a jerk, or there's another Aramaic idiom that goes with that, which is swine. Swine doesn't mean that demons get shot into a pig and they jump over a cliff. Swine was a metaphor for a person who could be in the presence of a catalytic event, like Jesus in the temple, or demons cast out, or all of a sudden the blind man sees, and they can't even comprehend the miracle before them because they can't let go of the ideas in their head. So what ends up happening is, instead of them experiencing an awakening, it grabs onto those places within themselves that they're not open. And of course, they kind of go off the deep end in a sense. And what did Jesus say after? And this lines up with the Course in Miracles too. What did Jesus say after a healing? He would say, don't go back home. Just go out into the desert. In other words, stay away from your family. Don't go talk to your brother and your sister and your mother and your stepfather. Stay away from them. Allow this to integrate, because the old ideas have to die.
Right.
And I'll say this too. I understand that temple experience in so many ways. And the weird thing about it was, I think I got it when I was 7 years old. Oh, people think he's all angry and yelling, and maybe there's anger there. But it's a pretty valid reason. If you cancel the thought, if I've living in New York for so long, I saw people intentionally hit people with motor vehicles.
Yeah.
And I didn't just go up and go, ooh, love and sunshine and Hare Krishna. And I'm not saying anything about Hare Krishna, and all that. Sometimes it's like, I saw that. I literally saw that. And I'm going to sit here with him until the police show up, and I'm going to give him your license plate number. And they'd be like, why are you being so hostile? It's like, you just ran him over. I saw things like that. My point again is, it's all about the goal or the intention behind it. And I think only the person I think Yeshua is the only one that can fully judge that, what his intentions were.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, that's a beautiful response, and I appreciate that. And
it's very detailed, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's what I love about you, Dale. You're very detailed. You don't leave anything unsaid, unturned. I have a question, and you had, and maybe it is compatible or not. I know a couple of 3 weeks ago, we had planned, Ellen and I with some friends, to see the movie Christspiracy. I didn't realize it was just available on a very limited basis, so we missed it. We would have seen you at the theater had we gone, because I saw you had posted.
You and 5 other people. So there was more than that.
We would have, but anyway, we would have seen you there if we had gone. But we went to see another great movie, actually, One Life, which, if you haven't seen that, not to die.
One Love.
One Life.
Oh, we were at the premiere. You talking about Marley?
No. One Life. This is about
a different one.
Anthony. Well, anyway, it's a great movie.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Never mind.
So here's the question: Christspiracy. When I looked at the trailer, I still don't know that much about it. But
that was on purpose, I think.
Yeah, but the trailer was more, from what I gathered. I said, this seems like a PETA agenda movie.
Propaganda, kind of.
Propaganda, and yet you seemed as though you really related to much of it. So I'd like to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, and it borders propaganda. They made a few errors in it. Funny, like in the beginning of the film, they have a point where one of the filmmakers is like, to him, he hadn't really thought much of Jesus. He wasn't even sure if he actually existed, but that they talked to James Tabor, and James said, actually, there was a historian that mentioned him, which of course was Josephus. But we've known for not millennia, but we've known for centuries that the Josephus reference to Jesus, meaning no references outside the Bible. We've known that Josephus reference was 200 years later, different. It was copied in as a scribal gloss, which is like, if you have the main text and then people write stuff in the margins. A lot of times when they copy the text, this is before printing presses and computers, they'll copy that stuff in, and sometimes they'll reference that it was a gloss, which is a marginal note. Sometimes they won't. The truth is, the Christian church will hold up Tacitus, Pliny the Elder, and Josephus as, and they only kind of skated over this in the film, as referencing Jesus, but neither Pliny the Elder or Tacitus mention Jesus of Nazareth. And I've said for decades, since I was in my early 20s, that Nazareth wasn't where he was from. Nazareth didn't exist then, which was also covered in the film. Didn't exist until a couple hundred years later. Nazareth, which they also didn't get in the film, but that's okay. They just needed to study a little more. Nazareth means initiate or initiate or branch. It means a fresh branch, like a fresh branch of life is what it means. They went on a different tact with Nazarene, which wasn't exactly correct. But my point was that right near the beginning of the movie, they're like, but there was an actual historian that talked about him. And I'm like, actually, there is zero credible references to Jesus outside of the Bible. There's not a single historian. There's not a letter. There's not a news blip. There's not a scrap of paper, parchment, papyrus, vellum, nothing that mentions him outside of the Bible, except for that one piece from Josephus, which was a forgery. And that kind of puts it in an interesting place. And I thought it was interesting that they hit that in the beginning of the film. But anyway, it turned into kind of, like a PETA and all these other things. I don't hold my... When I was 17 years old, let me put it simply, I stopped eating animals. And I don't hold it out there. I don't shove it down people's throats because I feel that if somebody's doing that, they don't really... Your heart's not really seated in what you're doing. You're more obsessed about what other people are doing. And for me, it's none of my business. It's funny, like, I stopped eating animals, but yet, and I mean, I'll still drink milk a little bit here and there, not a lot. But it's funny, I'll watch like Mountain Men or Last Alaskans, these shows where they're trapping animals and like having to cut them up and all that because otherwise they're going to die living there.
Right.
And I have no judgment about any of that, at all. But the film was it went into a topic that I've been talking about for decades, which is what was really happening in the temple and the blood canals that they had so that the hundreds of thousands of animals in a single day that were often slaughtered. And I like literally they make reference to priests being knee deep in blood. And it's true. It's written in many, many places outside of the Bible back then. And they would let it run down and then it would run down into the south side of Ginhanom, which is Gehenna. It was the city trash dump. And yeah, I mean, the film was, I post, you'll notice I don't post a lot of stuff like that. And I don't, and then once it's there, I almost never comment on it. I usually don't even look at the comments. I'll just put something up, not to be incendiary, but just as a bit of an exercise in being present and conscious.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, you'll see people, but like people were immediately biting a hook. And it wasn't my intention in putting it up. So I put like an addendum and I went, by the way, you probably don't want to comment on this unless you actually see it first.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people thought that I was implying that it was about Jesus not existing, which is a different subject entirely. And I think that the title was misleading on purpose to get people to watch it.
Right.
It's definitely not a film for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I told my wife, it was like, Loretta, I'm like, it would have been great to have you there with me. She ended up not feeling good and didn't go, but I was like, it wouldn't have been an easy watch for you. It went into to Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity. It wasn't just about Christianity. And it was basically not really about eating animals. It was about animal sacrifice hidden within all of the world's major religions, all of the world's major religions.
I believe
and it was very detailed and it was accurate. They made certain linguistic or historical mistakes, but there's no such thing as a documentary about the Bible that I'm not going to catch something that might be off. So
well, you had, the animal sacrifice, because one of the things I wanted to touch on today as well.
You're going to invite me to a barbecue? I'm just kidding.
Well, we actually have a house guest coming this evening. You're
going to barbecue him?
Yeah. And so guess what I made today? I made vegan meat sauce. And awesome. So anyway.
I do it a lot. So
he's a vegan, but anyway, and I'm good either way. I enjoy meat. But I wanted to, you talk about animal sacrifice, and it sort of leads into a bigger question. But, everything that's happening, I'd be curious about your thoughts about biblical prophecy, for example, and everything that's happening in the Middle East. And, what there's definitely a line in the sand. And I just really pray to bless everybody, because I do understand the compassion. I'm compassionate for both sides here. So I'm not one who's going to wave one flag over another. I'm just praying for everybody. But the one thing that when you were talking about sacrificial animals, they're talking about, we're very close apparently to sacrificing the red heifers. And what, I don't understand it really that well. I do feel that something big is erupting, whatever it is. Do you have any thoughts on, is this prophecy? Is it not? I mean, some people say it is absolutely prophecy, and some people say it's baloney.
So I'm very direct, and you know that.
Yeah.
First of all, everything you're speaking of, and this isn't against anyone's beliefs, all of it's on a screen. All of it is located in belief and intellect. And what do I mean by that? What I'm saying is anything in the quote unquote physical world that we feel that somehow the whole process works in reverse, that doing something in the physical world will somehow set a spiritual law into motion, is completely erroneous. Because it's not what we're doing in the physical world that matters. It is, again, our goal and or our intention. What's coming from the heart? What's radiating from the center of our being? So it's almost kind of like, I'll go back to the projector idea. It really, and I'm not saying it has no bearing, but what I'm saying is the actions aren't what matters. The act of sacrifice, let's look, what's Jesus hanging on a stick? It's a cultic, pagan, ritualistic human blood sacrifice. Tell me it's not that. People don't want to touch that. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, so it's like, bless your hearts. I love you dearly. But you really think that a guy hanging on a stick that we claim was the Son of God, or somehow God incarnate, which right there is an error, the idea God incarnate, but we're not going to go there. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao, that somehow him being a sacrifice absolves us of our own mistakes. The word sin means mistake. Mm-hmm. So, okay, our own missteps. Okay. So even when I'm 7 years old, I'm going, that doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense. It makes less sense today now that I've really studied it for decades. But my point in all of it is people are looking for something. Like Yeshua said, you will not know the minute, you will not know the hour. If somebody tells you look here or look there, essentially run in the other direction. Because if it's in the sky, the birds will precede you. If it's in the water, the fishes will get there first. It's a way of saying what he's talking about, as a matter of fact, another great quote, the kingdom of the Father, or of the absolute, is spread out upon the earth, but men do not see it. What you seek has already happened, but you do not comprehend it. Why? Because everybody's looking out on the level of effect. Thought is an effect of what feeling is, but unfortunately science, because they can measure thought, Marcel Vogel was measuring thoughts with IBM back in the 70s. Because they can measure thought, they think it's a source. But before you, let's put it this way, when you walk into a room, before you ever have a thought, you first have a feeling. And it's not good, bad, anything. You pick something up that you can't quite enunciate in thought. And then if you focus on that or try to resist it, it'll enunciate into, I like how it feels, I don't like how it feels, it's cold, it's hot. The seed of creation is feminine feeling, not masculine thought. And all of these ideas of sacrifice, of what people call prophecy, which is not what prophecy actually meant, all of that exists in the movie, on the screen, on the level of thought in an outside world that's not real in the first place. Because prophecy, anbiya or nabiyat in Aramaic, is a really beautiful word. It doesn't mean that somebody can't foresee the future, but it wasn't a soothsayer, a crystal ball, somebody predicting what's going to happen next Tuesday at 2 p.m., like all on Sunday all of the rapture memes that were flooding the news feed because of the eclipse. And I wanted to put one up on Tuesday and say, oops, sorry, I think I missed it. Uh, but just all these ideas, they're all looking in the physical world for
Mhm.
something that they're looking on the level of something that's not even real, on the
Right,
level of a super rational enigma
right.
to find purpose. When the truth of the matter is, prophet meant someone who there was no filter or veil or anything, not even the slightest thread between them and the knowledge, the wisdom of the absolute. That when God thought, they spoke. And it was absolutely immediate. It was instantaneous, as a matter of fact, and there was no judgment. Should I say this or should I not? And that's what a prophet was. Often when that happens, it could lock up into the future. It could have that, but unfortunately, people think this is the problem. People today, with a lack of study, think that prophecy is predictions for the future. And it's not what it means. And the funny thing about it is these religions know that's not what prophecy is. Prophecy is one now present moment when one is so wholly fully awake that you literally are the absolute. You are God in human form. And we're in those moments. It could be a few seconds. Some people, it could be most of a lifetime. When we're in those moments, we are a prophet. When Carlos Santana hits a note and it just goes, he's
Yeah,
not thinking, did I pay the gas bill? Or
yeah.
did I tie my left shoelace? He is there deep in faith. He's putting prophecy out right there. He's literally a shaman. Um, I think just that lesson alone, understanding that everybody's looking on the world level, like Jesus is going to come back with 100,000 angels and on a horse. There's going to be a white horse. And all these people are going to float up into the sky because heaven is somehow out away from the earth. But the funny thing is, if they float up into the sky, this great raptured legion of humans, then that means within a few hours maximum, the International Space Station is going to have to keep self-adjusting itself because there's going to be like hundreds, there's going to be all these humans floating around in our atmosphere trying to get up to the promised heaven. See again, they think ascension is floating up off the ground. They don't understand that they're looking at the level of the physical when the level of the physical is not
Right.
what's real, because
Mhm.
what you are looking for is what is looking.
Mhm.
And it's not, people will say what you seek is seeking you. I'm like, I didn't say that. I said that's Rumi, which is great. I quoted St. Francis of Assisi. He said, what you are looking for is what is looking. So if we could bring awareness back to again, to Yogananda, the inherent nature of our divinity, and to become the ever joyous witness of a stupendous cosmic drama, we'll recognize that all of the sacrifice and the theology and all these different religious ideas are all on that screen that's not even there. What's real is what's looking, and what sees through me is what sees through you. What sees as me sees as you. And it's
Wow.
funny, it's like we focus on all those little dots when, okay, let me point, this is the only begotten one. So that's Jesus right there. But how many lights are there really? Is there millions? No. Is there 7 billion people? No. There's one. We're
Right.
looking at the effect and expecting it to create cause, and it doesn't work that way.
Yes. Beautifully said. And I appreciate that so much, how you frame that. Thanks. Wow. Well, listen, I've got, you said you were going to be doing I saw that you posted, and this is another thing that's always been very interesting to me, is the Jesus temptation in the desert, 40 days in the desert. And I don't want you to give the whole thing away because I know you're doing a Zoom workshop on this, but what does that mean? What were those 40 days? You say they're not what we have maybe been
Well,
taught.
it's funny. Like one of the examples, and I make a joke because it's so hilarious. There was a Bible miniseries that came out like 10 years ago. Obama was president. I remember that for a reason. because they had Jesus's temptation, and it was put out by a very Christian. I don't like to say Christian because I'm sorry, I'm going to be blunt. I love you dearly with all your heart, but most people that label themselves Christian don't even know what the word means. Bless your heart, I love you dearly. If you're in judgment of other people, don't tell me you're a Christian, okay? If you're coming from anything than love, I don't want to hear it. Bless your heart. I've done the study, I've been through the experience. Okay, it's fine, believe what you need to believe, but Jesus is tempted in the desert. And funny enough, here comes Satan, devil, Lucifer, all these different names that people use, wearing a cloak. And who's in the cloak but Barack Obama? It was
Oh,
Obama's face. And I remember going, oh my God, this is like the greatest thing ever. And then, of course, the producers are like, oh, we love President Obama. It just
yeah.
happened to look
I
like him.
remember that. That was
Looks like
horrible.
him. It don't look like him at all. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh no, it looks exactly like him because it is him. Anyway, my point is, here's
No,
the
I
funny thing
agree.
about that.
It was awful.
There's things in the Bible that unless you've, this is where I have really only one other compadre that studies the Bible to the level who can make a lot of statements like this. That would be Bart Ehrman. Bart's great. He's just from a few hours from here. Bart's one of those guys that has to tell Christians, theologians, Bible experts, and professors what's in the Bible that they teach about. Because they'll make statements like me, I say this great thing around Christmas. I'm like, well, okay, where was Jesus born? And people say he was born in a manger. I'm like, no, it said he was laid in a manger, which is an animal's feed trough. Okay, but where was he born? What town? And people say Bethlehem. I'm like, okay, what's his name? And they say Jesus of Nazareth. I'm sorry, the ice cream man is coming by. I don't know if Zoom's going to let you hear the
No,
music or not. But Nazareth is a town that didn't exist when he was alive. I know this is stuff I talk about a lot. But what is it? Where is it? People say he was born. He was born in a stable. I'm like, okay. And if I ask a preacher, a minister, an expert in the Bible, I'll say, what structure was Jesus born in? They'll say a stable. I'm like, okay. Can you please point to the place in the four Gospels, anywhere, one single verse where it says he was born in a stable? And then they'll go, oh, well, And when they look, it's not there. The stable idea comes from 1223 from St. Francis of Assisi when he put it in an Italian context in such a way that the local farmer kids would understand. Okay, well, that's interesting. Another idea is that the devil came up to Jesus in the desert. And first of all, I'd love to see the Bible that says that he met the devil. It's not there. And then they'll say, yeah. And I've seen translations where it says Satan. I've seen translations that say Lucifer, which are two completely different characters that are not related. Satan, Satana, means a being divided against itself. It's not a person. It's not a being. It's not fell from heaven. Where's heaven? Heaven is that non-dual, full, whole, holy state of being. Fell from heaven, which means what? Fell fully into the underworld. Where's the underworld? It's here. The physical world is the underworld. This is the underworld that was spoken of, which means that the holiness fell asleep in a physical body. And then the good me fights the bad me. And then Satan becomes this changing cast of characters in my life where I project my own inner turmoil onto all these other people that I'm pointing out as cause. But I'm feeling what's already inside of me, which is exactly what the temptation is. In Aramaic, the word's akil-kartsa. It means tempter or accuser or resistor. It's not a devil. It's not a demon. All these other ideas. In Lakota, they have a similar vision quest. They call it Iktomi, the trickster. It's right here.
yeah, it's our own inner conflict.
He met his ego. He met his own ego waffle floating
Yeah,
in the desert.
yeah.
He met his own ego. And those temptations, which I'm not really going to get into here, I'll do that on the call. All those temptations were things going. I'm sure you've had a moment where maybe you're on stage or maybe you were doing a healing service or something. You and I have done so much together over the years. We've had so many things we've done together. And it's like you've probably had where you're in a healing mode or something like that, and there's this little tomcat like Tom and Jerry. There's the good Tom on this side and the bad Tom. The one over here is like an angel with a halo, and the one over here has a pitchfork and there's flames. And the angel saying, "Oh, be nice to cute little Jerry." And the bad Tom's like, "No, poke him in the butt, send him into hell," and all these other things. We have those, like, even in healing events where sometimes stuff pops up, or in prayer, or in meditation, or in ecstatic events or whatever. Well, that's, desert, midbar means that all but the central pillar of one's energy body falls away, and we're basically brought into a raw, vulnerable, unprotected state of being, and we're fully exposed. And then we meet who we really are. And it's like people say, "Well, how can I get there?" I'm like, don't eat or drink for 4 or 5 days. Don't eat and just drink for 40 days. You'll find it. I've done as much as 40 days before.
Wow. Wow.
You meet your tempter, you meet your accuser, you meet your resistor.
Which is all you.
It's all you,
Yeah.
because what you're looking for is what is looking.
Right. Oh, I like
All
that.
Jesus was ever teaching was our recognition that, he didn't say y'all are idiots, but just how unconscious we sort of drag ourselves through life. And if we could just pay attention to now, when it says, "Give us this day our daily bread" in Aramaic, in the Greek, funny enough, the word for daily doesn't mean daily, as in every day. It means something that's absolutely hyper essential right now in this moment. Funny. It doesn't mean daily. No scholar would say that meant daily bread from the Koine Greek. In the Aramaic, the word is yomana. Oh, mana. Mana was the pita pockets that fall from the sky in all the Bible movies, right? And it hits them in the skull. No. Mana is, I say this, it's that true sustenance from within. You're doing a 20-kilometer race and you get to the 18th kilometer and all of a sudden the tank is empty. And then you look on the sideline and you see the little girl that we're raising funds for some kind of health care or something like that. And then the last 2 miles is easier than the first 2K.
Right.
That's mana. It's that true divine sustenance from within, which is what lachma is in the Lord's Prayer. But where it says daily in Aramaic, the word's yaumana. There's no word in Aramaic. There's yauma, which means a moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? What does that mean? It could be a day, a week, a month, a year. It could be 10 years. There's no word in Aramaic that means only day. Yaumana, because of the mana being there, has only one meaning. It means now. It means present moment. So give me what's ultra hyper essential now. But it's the recognition that it's not only coming from outside, as in physical bread, but it's divine sustenance that comes through me like an innate guidance system. And when you start tapping into that, that's what a prophet is. And you start looking at it on that kind of a level. There's a lot of people that are feeling that. But what happens is when that process starts happening and the energy body starts opening, one of the temptations was, the pinnacle of the temple, all that stuff that you're not aware of at a volume of 2, when the temple hits 77 in volume, all of a sudden, all that junk comes out and all the corks pop up on a lake, and you're aware of all this shadow and grit in your consciousness that you weren't aware of before because the volume was so low. Right. That's what the temptation is. And I go a lot deeper into it, and we all experience that probably on a daily basis.
I'm sure. Yeah, moment by moment basis. It's just presence. You had, there's so many, I mean, we could go on for hours, Dale. I've got a list, but there's, as we're winding down, there's something that you mentioned, and I find this interesting. And I'm sure I have a twinge of judgment in it. I'm not going to deny that. But I do, when you talk about, don't call yourself a Christian if you're out there judging everybody. And I totally agree with that. I don't believe, Jesus was out there pointing his finger, good, bad, ugly, whatever. And I'm finding, interestingly, a lot of my spiritual minister friends have strong feelings politically, okay? And there is a hatred for one side or the other, more on one side than the other, I would have to say. And I can understand preferences and aligning with one thought system over another. But the condemnation and the hatred, literal hatred, you can just feel it when they talk. How does that, what would Jesus think? How would Jesus address that if he were observing this and talking to a group?
Well, for starters, this is what would he call himself? Let's start with that.
What, teacher, friend,
No, I'm
guide?
not asking a question. I'm giving you
Oh,
the answer.
oh,
You get what I'm saying?
what would he call himself?
As soon as you define, you confine.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't a Christian. He wasn't a Jew. He wasn't a Muslim or a Buddhist. He was life itself, which is all of us at our core.
Mm-hmm.
And what he would do, in my opinion, what would Jesus do? First of all, he'd be the first one grabbed around the ankles in virtually all of the, or at least very many of the houses with his name on them, and he'd be almost immediately drug out into the street because he would stink. He'd probably be barefoot. He'd be dirty. He'd be unkempt, smell like body odor. He'd be hanging out with prostitutes, tax collectors, homosexuals, bisexuals. Who knows? Because again, people are looking on the level of what is not real to find meaning for what is. And they're looking on the level of the physical, expecting an effect. The only thing we can see in the physical world is effect. They're expecting an effect to create a spiritual cause. But there's only one true cause, and that's love. And I'm being literal, very literal. So now it's funny. People will say, you spot it, you got it. I'm like, no, that's BS. It's not true. That's belief system. It's not you spot it, you got it. It's if you spot it and you've got a huge, serious rub with it and you're going into deep hostility about it, then you've got it. So what does that mean? That means, as an example, if someone's taking the time on some kind of, church talk, sermon, TV evangelist thing to scream and yell about the sins of homosexuality, the only way that they would have a rub with it is the crashing together between their indoctrination and conditioning and the root of what they feel inside of themselves, which has homosexual tendencies. And when the two of those crash together, they'll look at everyone outside of themselves as the cause for what they're feeling. And they'll do anything they possibly can to choke it dead in the outside world. Mm-hmm. So I'm coming for you, Pat Robertson, in the afterlife. I heard many things that you say, and I say it with all the love in my heart. That is the issue. That in which you judge another, you are guilty of practicing. What does judge mean? It means measure. It means to cut something away and say, this is appropriate and this is not appropriate. Okay? Now, we can say this is appropriate and this is not appropriate. You're not going to walk up to my child in a mall and push them out of the way. There's appropriate and there's inappropriate. However, if I'm going to go flipping out and grabbing, whatever, it's all, again, it comes back to where am I coming from? If you're going to have a baseball bat, then maybe I'm going to have to grab something, to protect my child or even myself. Again, it's about intention. It's not about the action. Funny, karma. I see even Alan Watts would say, what was it he said karma was? Action. But it's not actually the actions. Karma isn't the action. Karma is how you feel about it. It's what your intention is, regardless of physically what's happening. And, it's funny, like a good friend of mine, he was like, I know you live in Asheville and it's like a mecca of, he didn't say LGBTQ plus, but It was funny. It wasn't until he started coming to my workshops down in Asheville, and he was like, I know when you said 3/4 of your friends are gay, trans, and many you don't even know what they are or which direction they're going. And he was like, I just thought you were trying to be a good person. And he fell into my arms just sobbing. And he's like, he was like, God damn it. Every single thing that I ever judged in any other person in my entire life was all of the shit that was in my own heart. And a lot of it for him came from the Catholic Church, which had a lot of beauty in it too for him. So, I mean, today, what would he be doing? He would be pissing off every single solitary pile of BS human that's on the planet right now. And I say that with love. Because again, even in the presence of a miracle, of something miraculous, of a catalyst, in the presence of a catalyst, they want to kill it. Whether it's Bob Marley, RFK, JFK, and I'm not saying any of them were perfect, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, any of them. I pick them, pick lots of them. And then what's on the flip side of that is the people that are trying to exterminate something outside of themselves, kind of like Adolf Hitler. What happened because they had some of his DNA from the bunker that he burned up with Eva Braun. And when they analyzed his DNA, what was he? He was Jewish. Sacred belly laugh. Am I saying it's funny? No, I'm not saying it's funny at all. But that's kind of how the system works. It's all going to come back into balance. And what we're seeing right now is a matter, and I'm not saying everything's going to become hunky-dory. What I'm saying is it's not going to happen in the world until we do it first in our hearts. And the problems are not outside of ourselves. It's not the orange monster that could end up in the big White House. It's not the sleepy guy who doesn't know which way he's going at any particular moment in time. That's not the problem. The problem is how we feel about all of it, because we'll never be able to hold anyone or anything accountable unless we can first clear what's in our own hearts. Because as Yeshua said, it's not what really goes in, it's what comes out. And I don't believe he was just talking about food. I think he's saying it's not necessarily what you consume, it's what you choose to project out. Right. And we're seeing that really strong, high volume right now. People say, God, don't you wish you could be alive at the time of Jesus? I'm like, well, who says I wasn't, number one? And I'm like, number two, this is the big game now.
Yeah, we're in the final stretch. I mean, it's all coming up. It's exciting.
And let me add one last thing, actually.
Yeah,
the end times, this, or the end of the world. I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. L'shulame di alma in Matthew 28:20. What does the end of the world mean? It means shulame. It means the ceasing of my concept of time and space. Not end as in the last in days, but remember when I was talking about pinnacle of the temple? It's those moments when we're pushed to such a point when we're about to burst. What is your end point? What is the most that you can take before you blow? That's what the end times are. It doesn't necessarily mean that time and space is going to end, because we're always thinking linear. But right. God is not linear. God is the absolute. It's funny, like what was it that a circumference whose center is everywhere, but whose circumference is nowhere. And when you start realizing that, it's like, wow, so all of the drama I'm fighting at in the world is the drama parts in me. And I need to remove the roots of the drama within my own heart before I can even be proactively conscious and holding others accountable, rather than just injecting more hatred into the world. And that's really what we're here for, in my opinion.
I agree. And I love Dale. I love talking to you. I could talk for 5 more hours, and we'll do it again sooner than later. But tell people how they can get in touch with you, sign up for your workshops, all that good stuff.
Well, I'm easy to find on all social media. I don't know. Just look Dale Allen Hoffman. Google my name. Just put my name in Google. It'll take you to my website, which is daleallenhoffman.com, DALEALLEN, and then HOFFMAN. On my website, what I would recommend right now is go right to the front page, and right at the top, there's a thing for the Zoom event I'm doing next Saturday on the 20th. 3 p.m. Eastern time, and that's where I'm going to dig into the temptations from the inside out, and not in some whatever cutesy way, but from actual ancient texts. I'll be pulling it from ancient Greek and Aramaic texts. And the funny thing is, in the end, when you get closer to the source, you realize that like 99% of what we think about biblical things is just made up.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Well, you are a treasure. And what I'd love if you'd be willing to do it is close us out with the Lord's Prayer, Aramaic, and I'll just leave us
absolutely.
with that. And thanks everybody for tuning in, and make sure you share this, pass this good news along. And Dale, thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. So I'll just do it in Aramaic rather than the English. I feel like I'll just put it out there in the Aramaic. You'll know when it's over because I'll have that big oh man. So all I say with people is just be aware of your breath, be aware of the rise and the fall. And just let me do this for you. Just allow yourself to feel. Washmeya Nitkadash Mok Tete Malkutak Nehwed Tsibianak Aikana Washmeya Ap Bearea Hablan Lachmadasun Kanan Yomana Washbuklan Chaubein Dahain Aikana Daphanan Shbakan Lachayabain Wela Telan Lenesiune Ilapatsan Menbisha Metul Didelaki Malkuta Wahelo Ateshpukta Lelam Almin And so it is.